The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the small town of Maplewood, Ohio. Inside the bustling diner, the air was thick with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon, a comforting blend that had become a part of the town's heartbeat. Lily maneuvered through the crowded aisles with a practiced grace, her hands deftly balancing 3 plates piled high with eggs, pancakes, and crispy hash browns. She weaved past tables filled with chattering locals, the familiar sounds of laughter and clinking silverware, creating a symphony that filled her with a sense of belonging, at least for now. "Hey, Mr. Thompson, your usual?" Lily called out playfully, approaching the corner booth where the grumpy old man sat, his brow furrowed in concentration over the morning newspaper. He looked up, peering over his glasses with a mixture of annoyance and amusement. "Don't you have anything better to do than to bother me, Lily?" he grumbled, though a hint of a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "I swear you're going to drive me to an early grave." Lily set the plates down in front of him with a flourish, her grin widening. "Oh, come on. You know you'd miss me if I didn't. Besides, who else would keep you company while you sulk over your crossword puzzles?" He huffed, shaking his head. "You think you're funny, don't you? Just wait until I start charging you for my time." "Please, Mr. Thompson," she retorted, leaning casually against the booth. "Your company is worth at least a cup of coffee. I'll even let you have a free refill today." "Just don't spill it on my newspaper," he warned, his voice gruff yet playful. "This thing costs more than your paycheck, you know." As she turned away, she couldn't help but chuckle. Their banter had become a daily ritual, a strange companionship forged through years of exchanges that danced between annoyance and warmth. Mr. Thompson was a fixture in the diner, a constant presence that Lily had grown accustomed to, despite his irritable demeanor. He was a man of few words, but the words he chose often struck a chord, resonating deep within her. After what felt like an eternity, her shift finally came to an end. The diner had emptied, leaving behind only the sound of the coffee pot gurgling in the background. Lily slipped into her car, the familiar scent of her air freshener wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. She leaned back in the driver's seat, staring out at the parking lot bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. With the engine off, silence enveloped her, allowing her thoughts to drift. She had dreams, big dreams, of leaving Maplewood, of escaping the small-town life that felt more like a cage than a home. She wanted to travel, to explore the world beyond the borders of her mundane existence. But every day, the weight of her routine anchored her down, reminding her of the responsibilities and the ties that kept her rooted in place. "Maybe someday," she murmured to herself, the words feeling like a promise wrapped in hope. But as the shadows deepened around her, the reality of her situation loomed larger, dulling the spark of ambition she held tightly to her heart. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the diner, the sounds of raised voices cutting through the serene evening. Curiosity piqued, Lily swung the door open and stepped out, the cool air hitting her face as she made her way back inside. The atmosphere had shifted. Patrons whispered in hushed tones, casting worried glances toward Mr. Thompson's usual booth. "What's going on?" she asked Mike, a fellow server wiping down a table. "Did you see Mr. Thompson? He's been acting strange all day," Mike replied, shaking his head. "More irritated than usual. I think something's bothering him." Lily felt a twinge of concern. "What do you mean? He's always grumpy." "No, it's different this time. He's been snapping at everyone, even the regulars." Mike leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I heard him mumbling about something that sounded serious." Lily's heart raced. Mr. Thompson had his quirks, but he never let on about anything personal, always keeping his past shrouded in mystery. "Maybe he just needs a little space," she suggested, trying to dismiss the uneasy feeling creeping up her spine. But the whispers grew louder, and the tension in the diner was palpable. She glanced over at Mr. Thompson, who sat alone, his face clouded with a storm of emotions. He stared into his coffee cup, his fingers drumming impatiently on the table. For a moment, their eyes met, and Lily could see something dark lurking behind his usual gruff exterior. A flicker of fear, perhaps, or a weight of regret that he hadn't yet shared. "Lily!" a voice called, snapping her back to reality. It was Clara, the diner's owner. "Can you help me close up? We need to make sure everything's in order for tomorrow's rush." "Sure," Lily replied, her mind still lingering on Mr. Thompson. She stole one last glance in his direction before turning away, her thoughts swirling with questions. What could possibly be troubling him? Why did he seem so different today? As she helped Clara clean up, the unsettling atmosphere hung over her. The chatter of the remaining patrons faded into the background, their faces blurred as her mind raced with possibilities. What if something was truly wrong? What if Mr. Thompson needed her help? "Lily!" Clara's voice broke through her concentration once more. "You okay? You seem a bit distant." "Yeah, just thinking," she replied, forcing a smile. "I'll be right there." But as she wiped down the last table, her thoughts remained anchored to Mr. Thompson. She couldn't shake the feeling that the grumpy old man was hiding something significant. It was a feeling she couldn't ignore, a nagging instinct that urged her to dig deeper. As she stepped outside into the cool night air, the stars twinkling overhead, Lily found herself glancing back at the diner. A sudden chill ran down her spine, leaving her with an inexplicable sense of foreboding. What if this was the last time she would see Mr. Thompson? The thought made her stomach twist uncomfortably. "Get it together, Lily," she whispered to herself, shaking off the unease. But deep down, she knew that something was off, and the weight of that knowledge settled heavily on her shoulders as she drove away, the diner fading into the distance behind her. The sun rose lazily over the small town of Maplewood, casting a warm golden hue that filtered through the windows of the diner. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, a comforting routine for the morning patrons. However, a strange undercurrent of worry rippled through the diner as Lily prepared for the day ahead. She glanced at the clock, noting that Mr. Thompson had yet to arrive. It was unusual for the grumpy old man to miss breakfast, especially on a Tuesday when he was known to grumble about the state of the world while devouring his usual plate of eggs and toast. Lily wiped her hands on her apron, feeling a knot of concern tighten in her stomach. "Hey, Sam," she called out to the cook, who was flipping pancakes with the ease of someone who had done it for decades. "Have you seen Mr. Thompson this morning?" Sam paused, glancing towards the door, then shook his head. "Nope. He's usually here before the rush. You think something's up?" "I don't know. He seemed a bit off yesterday, more irritable than usual," she replied, trying to shake off the feeling of unease. The regulars at the diner, mostly older folks who came to gossip and share stories, began to murmur among themselves. Lily caught snippets of conversation, all directed towards the empty booth where Mr. Thompson usually sat, a testament to his presence in their small community. "Maybe he's sick," one elderly woman suggested, worry etched across her face. "Or maybe he finally decided to take a vacation," another chimed in, chuckling lightly, but then frowning at the thought. Lily's heart raced at the idea of something being wrong. She leaned against the counter, biting her lip as she stared out the window, half hoping to see his familiar figure trudging up the sidewalk. She'd served Mr. Thompson for years. His snappy comments and sarcastic remarks had become a part of her daily routine. Despite his gruff exterior, there was an odd comfort in their banter. As the morning wore on and the diner filled with the sounds of clinking cutlery and cheerful chatter, the absence of Mr. Thompson loomed larger. By the time the lunch shift rolled around, Lily couldn't shake her growing concern. She decided to keep an eye on the door, hoping against hope that he would walk in, grumbling about the weather or complaining about the service. But the door remained closed. When the clock struck 3, signaling the end of her shift, Lily felt a strange pull towards Mr. Thompson's house. It was a decision born from instinct rather than reason. She wiped down the tables, her mind racing, with thoughts of what she might find. As she locked up the diner, she could no longer ignore the gnawing worry that compelled her to check on him. The drive to Mr. Thompson's house was filled with a mixture of anxiety and determination. The streets of Maplewood were familiar, lined with quaint houses and well-kept gardens. But today they felt different, more foreboding. As she parked in front of his small, unassuming home, her heart pounded in her chest. The front yard was overgrown, the grass needing a trim, and the porch light flickered uncertainly, as if reflecting her own doubts. "Okay, Lily, you can do this," she muttered to herself, pushing the car door open and stepping out into the cool evening air. The house loomed before her, its beige siding peeling slightly, but it had always seemed like a cozy refuge for Mr. Thompson. She walked up the creaking steps, her breath hitching as she reached the door. It was ajar, a detail that sent a chill down her spine. "Mr. Thompson?" she called out hesitantly, pushing the door open wider. "Are you in there?" Silence answered her, and her heart raced even faster. She stepped inside, glancing around the dimly lit living room. Everything looked normal at first glance. His old recliner was still positioned in front of the television, and the coffee table was cluttered with newspapers. But as she moved further into the house, she noticed something that made her stomach drop. There were signs of a struggle. A chair had been knocked over, and the coffee table was askew, the papers scattered across the floor. A sense of dread washed over her as she took a few cautious steps forward. Her instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. "Mr. Thompson!" she called again, her voice slightly more urgent now. She walked deeper into the house, her eyes darting around for any sign of him. The kitchen was dark, and the familiar smell of burnt toast lingered in the air, but there was no sign of life. Lily felt a cold sweat break out along her brow. "This isn't right," she whispered to herself. She turned to leave the kitchen when she spotted something out of the corner of her eye, a small, crumpled piece of paper lying on the floor next to the overturned chair. She knelt down to pick it up, her fingers trembling as she unfolded it. The words were jagged, hastily written, but they sent a shiver down her spine. "They're coming for me. I can't stay." Panic surged through her. Who was coming for him? What had he gotten himself into? Just as she was about to turn back towards the front door, a noise echoed from the back of the house. A soft thud. Lily froze, her heart pounding in her ears. "Mr. Thompson?" she called again, this time more softly, fear creeping into her voice. The house was silent again, save for the faint sounds of the wind rustling outside. Taking a deep breath, she decided to investigate. She moved cautiously towards the source of the sound, her mind racing with possibilities. As she approached the doorway leading to the back of the house, she could see the light switch on the wall, but it didn't seem to work. The shadows crept closer, and she felt a surge of courage mixed with fear as she stepped into the dimly lit hallway. "Mr. Thompson?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, and she could feel the chill of uncertainty in the air. A feeling of dread settled deep in her gut as she reached for the doorknob. She turned it slowly, her heart racing as the door creaked open. What awaited her on the other side was a darkened room, filled with the remnants of Mr. Thompson's life. Old boxes, dusty furniture, and the faint smell of something long forgotten. But as she stepped inside, her eyes caught something that made her blood run cold. A broken window stood wide open, the curtains billowing in the breeze as if the house itself were exhaling. A few shards of glass lay scattered on the floor, glinting ominously in the fading light. "Mr. Thompson!" she called one last time, her voice filled with desperation. But only silence answered her, a void that filled her with an overwhelming sense of dread and fear. As she stood there, reality began to sink in. Something terrible had happened to Mr. Thompson, and she was determined to uncover the truth behind his mysterious disappearance. Lily stood at the threshold of Mr. Thompson's house, her heart pounding in her chest. The police had arrived shortly after she reported her findings, but their lack of urgency only deepened her sense of dread. Officer Jenkins, a sturdy man with a bushy mustache, had examined the scene with a skeptical eye, while his partner, a young woman named Officer Davis, took notes in her notepad. "Nothing seems out of the ordinary, ma'am," Jenkins said, shaking his head after a cursory glance around the living room. "The door's ajar, sure, but that's not necessarily suspicious. He might have just gone out for a walk." "But there are signs of a struggle," Lily insisted, her voice rising in frustration. "The overturned chair, the broken picture frame. He wouldn't just leave like this." Officer Davis looked up from her notes, her brow furrowed. "We'll file a report, ma'am, but until we have more evidence, there's not much we can do. People disappear sometimes. It doesn't always mean foul play." Lily felt a chill run down her spine. The thought of Mr. Thompson, the grumpy old man who had become an irritable fixture in her life, simply vanishing, sent her mind reeling. She had known him for years, had served him countless cups of coffee, and through their bickering had formed a bond that was as frustrating as it was comforting. "We're just trying to help," Jenkins said, his tone softening slightly. "If you think he's in danger, you should reach out to his family or friends." "Friends?" She scoffed, crossing her arms tightly against her chest. "He doesn't have any. He's always been alone." "Then we'll keep an eye out," Officer Davis replied, her voice steady. "If you see anything unusual, call us." Lily nodded, though the officer's assurances did little to ease her anxiety. As they left, she lingered at the doorstep, staring into the dimly lit house. The silence enveloped her, a stark contrast to the clatter and chatter of the diner where she spent her days. Days passed without a word from Mr. Thompson. Each morning, she would wake up with a gnawing sense of absence, a void where his usual complaints and snide remarks should have been. The diner felt different without him, as if a part of its soul had been stripped away. Regulars would whisper among themselves, sharing rumors of his disappearance. But Lily kept her silence, her heart aching with worry. She found herself obsessively retracing their interactions, remembering their banter and the small moments of vulnerability that had slipped through the cracks of their gruff exchanges. Why had she never bothered to ask him more about his life? Why had she never pushed past the surface of his cantankerous facade? One evening, after closing the diner, she felt an insatiable urge to dig deeper into Mr. Thompson's past. She rummaged through the small storage room in the back, searching for anything that might give her a clue. Her hands brushed against dusty boxes filled with old menus and forgotten memorabilia. As she pulled one of the boxes closer, a stack of yellowed newspapers tumbled out, scattering across the floor. Lily knelt down and began flipping through the articles, her fingers trembling with anticipation. Most were mundane, covering the town's events, but then she stumbled upon an article about a robbery that had occurred years ago. The headline screamed, "Local man disappears after botched heist." Her breath caught in her throat as she read through the details. The victim was a man who had been involved in a crime ring, and the police had never uncovered his whereabouts. Could it be that Mr. Thompson had been connected to something so sinister? "Lily, you all right?" Mike, her friend and fellow diner employee, poked his head into the storage room. His blue eyes widened as he noticed the scattered papers. "What's all this?" "I think Mr. Thompson might have a past, Mike," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I found this article about a robbery. It's dated the same year he moved to town." Mike stepped closer, scanning the headline. "You think he was involved?" "I don't know," she admitted, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "But it makes sense. He's always been so secretive, so grumpy. What if he's hiding from something? Or someone?" "Lily, you can't jump to conclusions," Mike cautioned, though he seemed intrigued by the mystery. "Maybe he just needed a break from the world?" "Or maybe he's in trouble," she retorted, her determination hardening. "I can't just sit here and do nothing. I need to find out what really happened." Mike sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. "Okay, but be careful. This could get dangerous." "Dangerous?" Lily scoffed. "What do you mean? He's just an old man." "Yeah, but if there's something shady about his past, who knows what kind of trouble he might have stirred up? You could attract unwanted attention." Lily waved his concerns away, but a flicker of doubt sparked within her. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was meant to uncover the truth. She had to know what had happened to Mr. Thompson. As days turned into weeks, her search intensified. She frequently found herself at the local library, poring over archives and old records. Her obsession consumed her, and though she tried to maintain her routine at the diner, her thoughts were always elsewhere. One particularly busy afternoon, while serving customers, she caught a glimpse of a figure lingering outside the diner. He stood in the shadows, his face obscured by the brim of a dark hat. Lily's heart raced as she tried to shake off the uneasy feeling that settled in her stomach. "Hey, you good?" Mike asked, noticing her distraction as she poured coffee into a cup. "Yeah, just tired," she replied, forcing a smile. But her eyes kept drifting back to the figure. He didn't move, just watched with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Later that evening, as the diner began to empty, she caught another glimpse of the mysterious man. He was leaning against a lamppost, across the street, still observing. Just as she was about to approach him, he slipped into the shadows, disappearing from sight. "Lily, you're looking a bit pale," Mike commented as he wiped down the counter. "You really need to take a break." "I'm fine," she insisted, though she felt anything but. I think I'm being followed. Followed? Mike raised an eyebrow, concern etched across his face. You sure it's not just your imagination? No, I swear. There's a guy who keeps showing up. I don't know who he is, but he's been watching me. Say it. Maybe it's just someone who's interested in the diner, Mike suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. Or maybe it's just a coincidence. Lily shook her head vehemently. I don't believe in coincidences, especially not now. There's something off about this whole situation. The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that the figure was connected to Mr. Thompson's disappearance. She needed to confront this shadowy presence, to find out what he knew. But as the weight of uncertainty pressed down on her, she felt a shiver of fear coil in her stomach. What if she was getting in over her head? The next morning, determination surged through her once more. She wouldn't let fear dictate her actions. With a plan forming in her mind, she resolved to face whatever danger lay ahead, convinced that the answers she sought were just within reach. As she made her way to the diner, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change forever. Lily sat in the dim light of her small apartment, surrounded by stacks of old newspapers that chronicled the mundane events of their small Ohio town. The clattering of the diner's silverware and the soft hum of the coffee machine seemed a world away. She'd never expected that a simple search through the archives would lead her to the chilling article about Mr. Thompson, his name inked in bold, ominous letters that sent a shiver down her spine. The headline read, "Local man disappears after gruesome murder," and beneath it was a grainy photograph of a younger Mr. Thompson, his expression inscrutable, yet somehow familiar. The article detailed the unsolved crime that had haunted the town for decades. A young woman had vanished under suspicious circumstances, and whispers of Mr. Thompson's involvement had always lingered in the air, like a thick fog that never quite lifted. "What did you get yourself into, Mr. Thompson?" Lily whispered to no one but herself as she traced the outline of the faded photograph. She recalled the grumpy old man who had sat in his usual booth at the diner, his scowls often softened by their playful banter. His gruff exterior had always masked something deeper, a shadow that danced behind his eyes. And now, with the revelation of his past, those shadows loomed larger than ever. Her phone buzzed, breaking her reverie. The unknown number flashed ominously on the screen. Heart racing, she hesitated before answering. "Hello?" she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Lily?" The voice on the other end was low and raspy, sending chills racing down her spine. "You're looking for Mr. Thompson, aren't you?" "Who is this?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady despite the unease swelling in her chest. The caller chuckled darkly. "You're digging up old bones, and trust me, you don't want to get involved. There are things you don't know, secrets that should stay buried." "Secrets?" Lily's mind raced. "What do you know about him? What happened to Mr. Thompson?" "Just know that he's not who you think he is," the voice warned, a hint of urgency creeping in. "And you're in danger if you keep searching." Before Lily could respond, the line went dead, leaving her clutching the phone tightly, her knuckles white from the pressure. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of fear and determination igniting within her. She needed answers, and this call only fueled her resolve. Determined to discover the truth, she gathered the newspapers and her notes, stuffing them into her bag before heading back to the diner. The fluorescent lights flickered above her as she pushed open the door, the familiar scent of coffee and sizzling bacon wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. But today it felt different. Today it felt like a stage set for a darker drama. As she moved through the diner, the usual chatter seemed muted, the laughter of regulars dulled by the weight of her discovery. She stepped behind the counter, her friend and fellow waitress, Sarah, looked up from where she was wiping down the counter, her brow furrowed in concern. "Hey, Lily," Sarah said, noticing the tension in her friend's demeanor. "You look like you've seen a ghost?" "I think I might have," Lily replied, forcing a half smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I found something about Mr. Thompson." "What do you mean? Is he okay?" Sarah's voice was laced with worry. "No," Lily sighed, glancing around the diner to ensure no one was eavesdropping. He might be in trouble. I found an article about a murder he was connected to. And then I got a call from someone warning me to stop looking for him." Are you serious? Sarah's eyes widened. What did they say? Lily recounted the conversation, her voice barely above a whisper. As she spoke, she saw the color drain from Sarah's face. That doesn't sound good, Lily. You need to be careful. I know, Lily said, her heart racing as she recalled the caller's warning. But I can't just ignore this. I need to know what happened to him. Maybe you should involve the police? Sarah suggested hesitantly, her brow furrowing in thought. If there's something dangerous happening, they can help. Lily shook her head. I don't want to involve the police unless I have something concrete. Right now, it's just a hunch and a creepy phone call. I need to find out more first. Just promise me you'll be careful, okay? Sarah pleaded, her concern evident. I'll keep an eye out for you. Lily nodded, grateful for her friend's support. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. Thanks, Sarah. I'll be fine. I just need to dig deeper. As the evening progressed, the diner filled with patrons, each lost in their own conversations. But Lily's mind was elsewhere, consumed by the mystery of Mr. Thompson. Whenever she glanced at the corner booth where he usually sat, a pang of sadness washed over her. He had been a fixture in her life, an irritable yet oddly comforting presence. Now he was gone, and the weight of unanswered questions hung heavily in the air. Once the last customers had left and the diner was quiet, Lily decided to take another look at the old newspapers. She hoped to find more clues that could lead her to Mr. Thompson. She returned to her apartment, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the stillness. Sitting at the table, she spread the newspapers out before her, searching for any mention of the crime that had haunted the town. She felt like a detective piecing together a puzzle, each fragment leading her closer to the truth. As she scanned the pages, she found more references to the crime, details about the victim, the investigation, and the mounting suspicions surrounding Mr. Thompson. Hours passed as she immersed herself in the history of the case, her mind racing with possibilities. Just as she began to feel overwhelmed, a knock on her door startled her. She jumped, her heart racing as she approached cautiously. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. "It's Mike," came the familiar voice of her friend. "Can I come in?" Relief washed over her as she opened the door. Mike stepped inside, his brow furrowed with concern. "You look like you haven't slept in days. What's going on?" Lily gestured to the scattered newspapers on the table. "I found out some disturbing things about Mr. Thompson. I think he might be in real danger." "Let me help," Mike said, his expression serious. "What do you know?" Lily explained everything. The article about the murder, the phone call, and her growing obsession with uncovering the truth. Mike listened intently, nodding as she spoke, a mixture of concern and admiration in his eyes. "You're really going to chase this down, aren't you?" he said, a hint of a smile breaking through. "I always knew you were stubborn." "I have to," Lily replied, her determination unwavering. "I can't just sit back and do nothing." "All right then," Mike said, his demeanor shifting to one of resolve. "What's the plan?" "We need to find out more about the people involved in that case," Lily said. "Maybe there are others who have more information. If I can find someone who knew Mr. Thompson back then, it might lead us to the truth." "Let's do it," Mike said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "But we have to be careful. If there's someone out there warning you to stop, they might not take kindly to us poking around." "I know," Lily said, her heart pounding. But the thrill of the chase ignited a fire within her. "But I can't back down now. Not when I'm so close." As they began to formulate a plan, a quiet resolve settled over them. The night stretched on, filled with whispered strategies and the promise of unraveling a mystery that had long remained buried. Little did they know, the darkness surrounding Mr. Thompson was deeper than they could have ever imagined, and the truth they sought would come at a cost. As Lily delved deeper into the mystery of Mr. Thompson's disappearance, the weight of her fears pressed heavily against her chest. It was as if the shadows of the diner had morphed into something more sinister, lurking just beyond the edges of her vision. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the neon lights, heightened her senses, making her acutely aware of the figure she had seen watching her. The figure who seemed to know more than he was letting on. Determined to uncover the truth, Lily decided she wouldn't face this alone. Mike, her longtime friend and a local mechanic with a penchant for adventure, seemed like the perfect accomplice. She found him tinkering with a vintage car outside his garage, a smudge of grease on his cheek as he tightened a bolt. "Mike!" she called, waving her arms to catch his attention. He looked up, wiping his hands on a rag and approaching her with a curious expression. "What's up, Lily? You look like you've seen a ghost," he teased, chuckling lightly. "It's worse than that. It's about Mr. Thompson," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. "I think something's really wrong, and I need your help." His demeanor shifted instantly, the humor fading from his face. "What do you mean? Is he still missing?" "I think he might have been involved in something dangerous," she explained, glancing over her shoulder, as if the figure might appear at any moment. "And there's this guy who's been watching me. I think he knows what happened." "All right, what do you need me to do?" Mike asked, his brow furrowing as he crossed his arms. The concern in his eyes made her feel a little more grounded. "I want to set a trap. I think if we can lure him out, we might get some answers," Lily said, her resolve strengthening. "I have a plan." Mike nodded, the gears in his mind turning. "Okay, let's hear it." They spent the next few hours gathering supplies and discussing their strategy. Lily's heart raced with a mix of excitement and fear as she outlined her idea. They would create the illusion that she was alone at the diner late at night, leaving out clues for the mysterious figure to follow. If he was as interested in her as she suspected, he wouldn't be able to resist. As night fell, the diner took on an eerie quality, the usual sounds of clattering dishes replaced by an unsettling silence. Lily set the scene, leaving a few lights dimmed and the door slightly ajar, a silent invitation for the figure to enter. Mike hid in the back, ready to spring into action at the first sign of trouble. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered, peering through the kitchen door. "What if he's dangerous?" "I have to know what he knows, Mike," Lily replied, her voice steady yet filled with trepidation. "I can't just wait around any longer." Minutes felt like hours as she waited, the ticking clock on the wall echoing in her mind. Just when she thought the plan might fail, she heard the faintest sound of footsteps approaching. Her heart raced, and she forced herself to remain calm. She took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. The door creaked open slowly, and the figure stepped inside, cloaked in shadows. Lily squinted, trying to make out his features, but the dim light obscured his face. He was tall and seemed to carry an air of familiarity that sent chills down her spine. "Hello?" Lily called out, feigning nonchalance. "Is anyone there?" He didn't respond immediately, and just as she was about to call again, Mike leaped from his hiding spot, startling the figure. "Gotcha!" he shouted, grabbing the man's arm. The figure reacted quickly, spinning around and attempting to break free, but Mike held on tightly. "Wait, don't!" Lily exclaimed, stepping forward. "We just want to talk." The man paused, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. "You shouldn't have done this," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "You don't know what you're getting into." "Then tell us," Lily cried, her frustration boiling over. "What do you know about Mr. Thompson? Where is he?" The figure hesitated, glancing back at Mike, who still had a firm grip on his arm. "You really want to know?" he asked, his tone shifting to something more serious. "It's not what you think." "Try me," Lily challenged, her heart pounding in her chest. "Mr. Thompson isn't who you think he is," the man replied, his gaze piercing into hers. "He has a past, one that he's tried to escape." "What do you mean?" Lily pressed, desperate for answers. "He was involved in something significant a long time ago, something that made him a target," the man said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He faked his own death to get away from it all." "Faked his death?" Mike echoed, his grip relaxing slightly as confusion washed over him. "Why would he do that?" "Because the people he was running from don't forget," the figure replied, his expression serious, "and they won't stop until they find him." "Why are you telling us this?" Lily asked, her mind racing with the implications of his words. "What do you have to gain?" "I'm not his enemy," the man said, shaking his head. "I'm trying to help him. He's in danger, and if you keep digging, you'll be in danger too." Lily felt a rush of emotions. Fear, anger, confusion. It was too much to process all at once. "Where is he? Is he safe?" The figure opened his mouth to respond, but just then a loud crash echoed from outside, startling them all. In that moment of distraction, The man pulled away from Mike's grasp and bolted for the door. "Stop!" Lily shouted, but it was too late. He dashed into the night, disappearing into the shadows. "Damn it!" Mike cursed, rushing after him. "We can't let him get away!" Lily followed closely behind, her heart racing as they chased the figure into the darkened streets of the small town. But he was quick, blending into the night like a ghost. Just as they turned a corner, they lost sight of him entirely. Breathless and frustrated, they stopped, leaning against a nearby wall as they tried to catch their breath. "What the hell was that?" Mike panted, running a hand through his hair in disbelief. "I don't know," Lily replied, her mind spinning. "But we need to find him. He knows something important about Mr. Thompson." "You think he'll come back?" Mike asked, glancing around as if expecting the figure to reappear. "I don't know," she said, her thoughts racing. "But we can't give up. I need to find out the truth, for Mr. Thompson and for myself." As they stood there in the darkness, a sense of urgency filled the air. Lily knew that the answers she sought were closer than ever, but the danger was palpable. Unraveling the mystery of Mr. Thompson's past would not only change her understanding of him, but also lead her down a path she could never have anticipated. Lily stumbled into the diner, her heart racing, the revelation from the mysterious figure echoing in her mind. The familiar smell of coffee and grilled bacon filled the air, but today it felt different. The clatter of dishes and the hum of conversations around her faded into a distant murmur as she made her way to the counter. The weight of the past pressed down on her like a heavy blanket, suffocating and unyielding. How could Mr. Thompson have hidden such a significant part of his life? What else was he hiding? She wiped down the counter with a rag, her thoughts swirling like the steam rising from the coffee pot. Her mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. Just yesterday, he had been sitting in his usual booth, grumbling about the weather and the price of eggs. Now she couldn't shake the feeling that the man she thought she knew was just a facade, a mask worn to protect an identity intertwined with secrets. The bell above the diner door rang, pulling her from her reverie. Her friend Mike sauntered in, his face creased with concern. "Hey, you okay?" He approached her, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "Not really," Lily replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I found out some things about Mr. Thompson, things I never expected." Mike raised an eyebrow, the playful glint in his eyes replaced by a serious expression. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, weighing her words carefully. "I think he's not who he says he is. I mean, he's not just a grumpy old man. There's more to his story." "More? Like what?" he pressed, his curiosity piqued. Lily took a deep breath, feeling the anxiety knotting her stomach. "I found out about his past, something involving a crime, something serious. And now I think he might have faked his own death." "Faked his death?" "That's a leap, Lily," Mike said, skepticism lacing his tone. "Do you have any proof?" Before she could respond, her phone rang, its shrill tone slicing through the tension in the air. She glanced at the screen. It was the same unknown number that had called her before. "Oh my God," she muttered, her heart racing again. "It's him." "Who?" Mike asked, leaning closer, intrigued. "Just someone who might know what happened to Mr. Thompson?" She answered the call, her voice shaking slightly. "Hello?" "Lily." The voice on the other end was low and urgent, sending chills down her spine. "You need to listen carefully. Meet me at the old warehouse by the river. It's important." "Who are you?" she demanded, her heart thudding in her chest. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I know what happened to Mr. Thompson," the voice replied, almost a whisper. "And you deserve to know the truth. But you have to hurry. They're watching." The line went dead, leaving her standing frozen in place. Mike's eyes were wide with concern. "What did he say?" "They're watching?" she repeated, panic creeping into her voice. "I have to go." "Wait, are you serious? You can't just walk into a situation like that alone?" Mike urged, gripping her arm tightly. "This is dangerous." "I don't have a choice, Mike. I need answers. I need to know why he disappeared and what all of this means." She shook off his grip and moved toward the door, her determination unyielding. "Then I'm coming with you," Mike insisted, following her out into the crisp evening air. "You're not going alone." They climbed into her old car, the engine sputtering to life as she pulled onto the road, her mind racing with a mix of excitement and dread. The streets of their small town blurred past, familiar but distant, as if she were driving through someone else's memories. She could feel Mike's eyes on her, filled with concern, yet bolstered by a sense of camaraderie. As they approached the warehouse, its dilapidated structure loomed ahead, illuminated by a single flickering streetlight. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the kind that sent shivers up her spine. "Are you sure about this?" Mike asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily nodded, swallowing hard. "I have to know the truth." They stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching underfoot as they approached the entrance. The air was stale, filled with the scent of damp wood and rusted metal. "Stay close," she instructed, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. They stepped into the dimly lit interior, the faint echo of their footsteps reverberating off the walls. "Hello?" she called, her voice wavering slightly. "Is anyone here?" A figure emerged from the shadows, the silhouette of a man stepping into the pale light. He looked familiar, but she couldn't quite place him. "You came," he said, his voice low but firm. "Who are you?" Lily demanded, her heart racing. "What do you know about Mr. Thompson?" "I'm an old friend of his," the man replied, stepping closer, revealing a weathered face etched with lines of worry. "My name is Samuel. I've been trying to find him for years." "Find him? You mean he's alive?" Lily's breath hitched, the realization washing over her like a wave. "Why would he disappear? What's going on?" "Mr. Thompson faked his own death to escape his past," Samuel explained, his eyes darkening. "There are people who want him dead because of what he knows. He thought it would be safer this way, for both of you." "Safer? For me? What do you mean?" she pressed, confusion and fear swirling in her mind. "He didn't want you to get caught up in it," Samuel said, his voice heavy with regret. "He cared about you, more than you know. But now, with the truth coming out, it's only a matter of time before they find you too." Lily's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. But the picture was far from clear. "What do I do now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "First, you need to find him," Samuel urged, urgency lining his words. "He's in hiding, but he needs your help. He trusts you. But you have to be careful. They're always watching." As the gravity of the situation settled in, Lily felt a mixture of fear and determination rising within her. She didn't just want to know the truth. She needed to protect Mr. Thompson, the man who had become an unexpected part of her life, no matter how grumpy or irritable he might be. "Where do I start?" she asked, her resolve strengthening. Samuel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There are clues in his past, places he frequented, people he trusted. Start there, but be cautious. The deeper you dig, the more danger you'll encounter." Lily nodded, feeling the weight of her choice. She was stepping into a world of shadows, a world that had been hidden from her for far too long. As she stood there in the abandoned warehouse, the reality of her situation settled in. Her life was about to change forever, and she was ready to confront the unknown, no matter the cost.